I needed some water. Have a dry mouth. Okay. Well. Well, thank you all for being here and for having me here. It's great to be here, actually, in Venice. Purtroppo il mio italiano è abbastanza povero, allora I'll switch into English. As I said before, I do. Yeah, sorry. I do resonate quite a lot with most of what was said here on stage before. And actually, if you go back here, I mean, I could see here written like soluzioni, natura, vita, ispirazione, cuore, cultura, etc., etc. And I think that the label or the word that was also pronounced here before that unites all this, that ties it all together, I think it's education. Education. I mean, I'm a professor, I teach, and I think, oh my God, how can we do it so badly? We have a very bad educational system, and I don't mean about the specific systems of different countries. I mean the education with a capital E, education, not academic education, right? We are very bad at conveying messages, at changing phrase of mind, and we truly need to think outside the box. We truly need to, right? And I have the feeling, even when you were mentioning, I mean, actually, I love those two quotes, from Jane Goodall and from Carl Sagan. And if you think about it, even though we do resonate with their words and say, yeah, sure, we're on the same page, still, I think we don't quite get it. Because when we do, the best case scenario, you know what we do? What we end up doing, simply rehearse it, simply parrot their lines. So we repeat their message, but it becomes formal. It becomes a game of words. So we don't reach out into the actual practical solutions that need to be implemented, even though we say, oh, yeah, sure, they are so right? So I like to think, I usually, I give talks to secondary school kids. I love those ages. It's the right age to do something with them. Even primary school, better, but, in their teens. And I tell them, think about Ptolemy, okay, Ptolemy. We thought a few centuries ago that the Earth was sitting at the center and everything was revolving around us, right? And kids might say, oh, how stupid they were. I mean, we caricaturize Ptolemy's system, and yet we don't realize that it was the best available system at the time. It allowed you to predict the phases of Venus, the moon, many things, and you could tweak it, and it could work, and it did work for a few centuries. And most important, it was in the textbooks. So I tell these kids, say, imagine you are a student of Ptolemy, and it's written in the textbook, and you have to take an exam, and you rehearse it, so you memorize it, you learn it by heart. And at the exam, you simply parrot the lines. The Earth sits at the center, and then you get an A+, or a 30 in Italian system, a 30 out of 30. Okay, so you get best mark. And they say, oh, I'm so proud of myself. Oh, I'm so smart. Well, now let's travel 100 years from now. Think 2125, 100 years from now. And just think, what will the future generations be laughing at of what we think today, of today's textbooks, right? So in Planta Sapiens, in my popular book, actually it's in Italian, well, the title works in every single language, thanks to Latin, so it's Planta Sapiens in every single language. But that's one thing people will laugh at, that, oh, we thought Homo sapiens was somewhat special, right? So, no, that's something that we might get there. We haven't got there yet, despite Jane Goodall, despite Carl Sagan, despite so many bright minds telling us and telling us and telling us, and we still don't get it, right? I mean, it's so difficult. I was looking at from my seat to this plant here, and I was thinking, oh, I mean, it's so difficult to think of the plant as an agent, as a subject, not as an object, for decoration, for pleasure, for whatever, just as an agent in itself and for itself. So let's talk about climate change. I mean, we are not that good in learning from our mistakes. 7 out of 9 boundaries, okay, crossed, and counting, 8 and 9 soon, right? 9 out of 9 in a few years' time, right? I don't want to be pessimistic, just the other way around. But paradoxically, what I think is that if we are gonna change the game, paradoxically, we need to forget about ourselves. It doesn't work if we simply say, hey, we need to look after plants, we need to care for the planet because what? Because we need it? I need your oxygen, I need your textile, I need your fuel. So is it because we need them that we should respect them? We are not getting it. We should respect life for the intrinsic value it has, even if we didn't need it. That is the point, right? Right. You see? So it's not that easy. I mean it, right? So I mentioned that I founded a lab in a philosophy department, which is quite something. My dean is happy. She says, oh, let Paco play his game so he doesn't disturb us. And that's true. I can go to my lab and time-lapse plants. With time-lapse plants, with sticking electrodes, we register electrophysiological activity. So it's a real lab, not a philosophy lab, right? It's an experimental lab, right? So we do experiments with the lab and try to understand or to get an idea of their intelligence, their sentience, their capacities, right? And this is the key point. Why, Paco? People ask me, why did you found your lab in a philosophy department? And people might say, oh, can you make progress despite of not being a plant biologist? Or despite not being a psychologist, if you study learning or memory or attention or psychological mechanisms? And I say, no, it's the other way around. I can make progress, if I make any progress, we'll see, precisely because I'm not any of those. And what does this mean? Remember about this idea about being reductionists or being mechanistic. If I go to a plant physiology department and I go there and raise my arm, my hand and ask a question, they might say, what are you talking about? Plants being aware? Plants being sentient? I'm pretty sure you've got to be talking metaphorically. And when I say, no, Planta Sapiens, the title of the book, Planta Sapiens, is not a metaphor. People think it's just a literature. No, it's not metaphoric. I mean it, literally. So I mean they are sentient in the very same extent that we are. In fact, in the preface, I speak about, this is not a spoiler, it's just in the preface. So I say we are very much into navel gazing, okay? So I say navel gazing because I couldn't say anthropocentrism. If I said anthropocentrism, it would just be, oh, human-centric view. No, it's not just being human-centric, it's all sorts of centrism. So we are human-centric, we are animal-centric. You've got to be a human, or at least, a big animal, a primate or a mammal. You've got to have a neocortex. So we are neocortex-centric. If you are not a mammal, forget about it. We are neurocentric. If you have no neurons, forget about it. We are even locomotion-centric. So if you don't locomote, if you don't walk on 2 legs or 4 legs or 8 legs, if you don't walk around, if you don't reach your goals through locomotion, you cannot be intelligent. So we say, hey, you are sitting there still rooted to the soil. You cannot be intelligent because you are sessile, you are rooted, you are anchored, right? And let's twist it. Education is the other way around. You've got to say, hey, hold on a sec. How do you mean you've got to be stupid because you cannot locomote? You should say, how smart you've got to be to keep passing your genes despite being rooted. You've got to be doing something fabulous because I can run away, I can flee from predators, I can go and hunt, I can do all the things we fast animals do, but they are sitting. So if they still pass their genes without going extinct, they've got to be damn good at what they are doing. And we keep missing it because we think we are the gold standard. We provide the gold standard, the measuring rod. And we do not. Unfortunately, we do, but we need to forget about that, right? So arrogance, again. Humble, being more humble, that's another word that came out, to be humble, right? In fact, listen how rooted this problem is in our ego, that I went to this meeting in Dharamsala with the Dalai Lama a few years ago. A bunch of Western scientists. We were told to keep, bring a complimentary copy of your books if you have some or whatever, and just a reception with the Dalai Lama before a meeting we had with Buddhist monks. And naively, I handed a copy of Planta Sapiens to His Highness. He went, so I went like, plants are sentient. I was like, hey, I mean, we're on the same page, right? Plants are sentient. And then he went like, no way. How you mean? He said, literally, he said, only animals can feel. That's what he said. Yeah, I was amazed. But I learned, the best lessons are the ones that are a blow. So I felt such a blow. I learned a great lesson here because we have this attitude that we kind of think, hey, this narrow-minded vision, this tunnel vision is because we are Western scientists or like Western-centric approach. Traditional knowledge, other cultures, they might hold the secret key, the master key, remember the master key. Well, I learned that problems run way deeper. The Dalai Lama was, up his neck into animal-centric vision. Why? He gave us one of his books in return. I was browsing his book on the flight back home to Spain, and I read this passage. And it said, animals can feel because they locomote. So he was identifying subjective awareness, subjective sense of awareness with the capacity to locomote, right? And you see, why are we so obsessed with locomotion? Because it catches our eye, it grabs our attention, whatever behaves at our speed. So we take the temporal scale at which we make our observations as what counts, as the key scale. And that shouldn't be the case. I mean, who cares about my speed, about my temporal scale? What counts is the temporal scale at which that behavior that I'm studying unfolds. So if plants are slow, so be it. In fact, they are neither slow nor fast. They do things at the pace they need to be doing them. Plants don't say, hey, you've got to be stupid, you humans, you have to go shopping and cook dinner. They don't have to go shopping to cook dinner. They do dinner by photosynthesizing, being rooted. So different problems, different solutions, right? So we need to forget about ourselves. So paradoxically, let's get rid of yourself. And then you might get, for free, you might kill two birds with one stone. Treat them with respect, and thereby we will get something for ourselves. But not as a direct result, indirectly, right? So put it this way. Remember I was mentioning before when we were on stage about, hey, I couldn't crack open your skull and see your intelligence or your sentience. All I can do is study your overt behavior, right? So I can see how you behave. We do that through time-lapse photography. So we time-lapse plants, like a picture every minute, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. Then we assemble the footage and watch them moving around. So we can appreciate their doings in their own time scale, right? Through time-lapse photography. That's one window we use. Another window we use is electrophysiological measurements, right? So we can insert a couple of electrodes and amplify the signal and see what moves, what happens, what lights up. That's the very same thing, if you think about it, the very same thing we do with human and non-human animals. Brain imaging techniques, what lights up when I'm engaging in some cognitive task. I'm doing something, and then we see what lights up. So I can study your behavior or see what lights up in your brain, right? I can do those two things. We can do those two things too with plants, right? So when I go to a plant physiology department and tell them, hey, let's do this, and they don't quite get it. And then I go to a psychology department and say, hey, let's study plant learning. Can plants learn from their mistakes? And they say, how do you mean? They have no neurons. You need neurons, right? So I stop knocking doors, and I do it myself. Because what counts is not the solution that you get. It's not the answer. It's the possibility of raising new questions that were not being raised. That is the point. We don't have answers yet. We have different questions. That is the point, right? In fact, I tried knocking another door, which was veterinary school, right? So I went, this is true, right? I didn't bring footage. I prefer you to imagine it. We took this Venus flytrap. The Venus flytrap, you touch the inner hair snapshot, okay? The carnivorous plant. And we took it to the School of Veterinary. And I put them on their surgical room. where they, where they anesthetize dogs, cats, cows, horses, so veterinary school. And then I said, can we anesthetize my plant? And the guy went like, excuse me, hidden camera, this is for a TV show or something? Yeah, he thought I was pulling his leg. But let's go back to education. This is a full professor of veterinary who is shocked by the question, can you anesthetize my plant? Why? Because in 2025 textbooks, you don't get to talk about life being anesthetized, only about animal life being anesthetized. And yet, quantum level, yet the principles are the very same ones. So the anesthetic, in this case isoflurane, the one we use, we put a glass bell, put the plant inside the bell to saturate the inner air. So we soak a cotton pad with anesthetics, the one they use for animals, okay, that same anesthetic, and we put it into the glass bell. The plant absorbs the molecules through their leaves, and off you go. They go boom. You touch the inner hair, and it won't shut, right? It's anesthetized, right? So what's to me shocking is that you can give a perfectly clear explanation in terms of electrophysiology. So you might say, hey, of course, this drug is messing up with the membrane properties, the cell membrane properties. So ions don't cross the membrane. And then the cell doesn't depolarize, doesn't fire a spike of voltage. So neurons, they fire spikes of voltage. We call them action potentials. It's the same action potential that a plant cell fires when you touch the hair. So that's an action potential. It's like neuronal. But plant cells, despite not being neurons, they fire spikes of voltage. They have their own action potentials. There you go. You don't need neurons. So being neuronal is not what counts. It's electrochemical signaling what counts. And that's throughout nature. Bioelectricity. Life produces electricity, right? So you can have the same drug messing up those membrane properties and effectively having the plant knocked down, right? So put it this way. All the way until here, you might simply say, I have a physiological explanation for this. And it is true, I just gave it. It has to do with the ions crossing the membrane, effectively not allowing the plant to depolarize, blah, blah, blah. That was an electrophysiological explanation. But to me, the intriguing question comes next. Because this is not about knocking the plant down with a drug. We know we can do that. It's asking the next question, which is, hey, what happens to you? Have you been under surgical operation, general anesthetics? What happens when you come out of anesthesia? Oh, I'm back to normal, right? What is it? What's happening really? Really, think about it. You come out of anesthesia, and then going back to normal means recovering something you had lost temporarily. Oh, I'm aware of my surroundings yet again. I had lost that capacity, and I have recovered it, right? Why don't we raise this same question in the case of non-neural organisms like plants? Why don't you say, because when I wait for the plant to recover, the plant again goes back to normal, which means it responds, if only more slowly. It's like clumsily. It's like coming out of anesthesia. It takes its time to wear off the drug. Like, oh, here I am. The same with animals. It takes some time for you to go back to normal, to transition into, hey, I'm back to normal, right? So why don't we ask the very same question? Why don't we say, what does it mean for a plant to come out of anesthesia? You see why we needed to found a lab in a philosophy department? Because they don't ask these questions, right? So think about it. Of course, the answer is they are recovering their subjective sense of awareness. But I say, of course, and you might say, hey, Paco, why of course? Hold it. Where is the empirical evidence? And I ask, hold it. What is the empirical evidence that any of you is sentient and not just a zombie? As far as I'm concerned, I only have experience of my own feelings. Yours is something that I infer. I can only infer out of your overt behavior. So I can check out your behavior, your nodding, your whatever. I can see what lights up in your brain through brain imaging techniques. I can do all these things, right? So, but I don't have direct access to your states of awareness. So the epistemic situation is not different from plants. It is always a game of crossing the bridge in between the first person and the third person perspective. Now, we can learn a lesson from the animal literature. In the animal literature, go to, not just mammals, not those with a neocortex, but you can talk about birds. We know birds are so smart, right? Increasing literature on the topic. But now we speak of the smarts of honeybees, the fruit fly, Drosophila, termites, ant colonies, you name it. So invertebrates. If a few decades ago it was like, out of the question to ask whether a spider or an ant or a honeybee was sentient, nowadays it's a question being taken to the lab or to the field if you do field research. By the way, Jane Goodall, ethologist, we need to become plant ethologists because we observe them, first, domesticated species through agriculture. We've been sculpting their phenotype for 12,000 years, and we don't realize that those are not the guys being able to exhibit their full potential. I myself time-lapse climbing plants. I study climbing plants, right? So I put a pole, a support for the plant to climb onto it, right? So I can time-lapse the plant trying to reach for the pole, right? But first I forget that that plant has been shaped by humans for the last 12,000 years. Agriculture is called. And those plants might not be that smart because we have been providing the support generation after generation, right? So we want to study not the domesticated, but the wild plants in their local habitat. Because as we said, what counts is not what's inside the head, but what the head is inside of, right? So I need to understand not what's happening within the plant, but what is the problem space that the plant needs to navigate, right? So again, if we care about those ecosystems, for the plant's perspective, for the plant's own point of view, again, we might kill two birds with one stone. You see, right? So if you go to this animal literature and say, why do people think that honeybees or ants are sentient? Why? What's the cue they have? And then the answer is, well, they might say, for example, what happens to them when you anesthetize them. But you might also say, hey, are they able to integrate information? Because we think of plants, again, not just domesticated, but as cartoon version of plants. Like as if plants were simply responding to one source of stimulation. Like, think of phototropic behavior. So light, and then the plant grows towards light. As if light was the one and only thing that the plant is sensing. And that cartoon description of plant behavior allows us to say, oh, this is just a pre-programmed routine. It's hardwired. No intelligence here. It's just simply something in their genes. But that's not the real case. You see, if you are a plant ethologist, then you see, hey, it wasn't just light. It's feeling competition, kin, non-kin recognition, this chemical gradient, this thing going on below ground, this nutrient patch. So the plant is not simply responding on a one-to-one basis to one source of stimulation. It needs to integrate all these informational channels and provide a response that is globally adaptive, right? So when you do that, when you find that, then you say, oh, hold on a sec. When an animal integrates information, different parameters through different sensory modalities, we say, there is somebody at the wheel. There is somebody at the driving seat. This is a sentient creature. This is the one, in the animal's head, square quotes, doing the driving, saying, okay, light, chemical, kingdom, okay, let me make up my mind. Okay, this is going to be my global response. As if somebody's making the decisions up there. Now, what happens with plants? That it comes difficult to us to recognize this because we have this cartoon understanding of ourselves and think somebody is truly at the sitting wheel, at the driving seat. But that's a way of speaking. Again, if I crack open your skull, I don't find anybody sitting at the wheel. It's a way of speaking. It's emergent behavior. Actually, it's not just nervous system. It's neocortical and subcortical and hormonal and, think of the gut-brain axis, right? So we are holobionts. We are an assemble of life, right? So there is nobody sitting at the wheel in our own case. So we cannot think, oh, a plant cannot be sentient because there is not anyone sitting there. We need to change our mind. In fact, what I like to think with Planta Sapiens is that we learn two lessons. First, we learn what plant intelligence is about. We can truly learn what plant intelligence is about non-metaphorically, doing the science that needs to be done, raising the bold questions that need to be raised, right? But at the same time, we can learn to rethink ourselves. So maybe we are way more distributed than we thought we were. Maybe we are not that centralized, because we need to get rid of this idea of being neurocentric, being locomotion-centric. Maybe we are way more Republican, more horizontal, and not that vertical as we thought we were. So those are the two lessons. We can learn about them, and we can learn about ourselves to rethink ourselves, right? So take another example. Think of learning. You all know about Pavlov's dog, right? So Pavlov's dog, you know the name, you know the game, right? So you ring the bell, the dog says, so what? Then food, oh, food, salivate. Then bell, food, oh, bell, oh, I got it. When the bell rings, I can salivate because I'm expecting the future food. So the dog has learned the association to also Pavlov's dog, right? Okay, so that is one marker, one signature of sentience that has been used in the animal literature. In the animal literature, if somebody is sitting at the wheel connecting the dots, we say, hey, here there is a sentient creature, right? So think that if we get rid of this arrogance, this species, blah, 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 then we might say, okay, why don't we try to customize these experiments? Why don't we think in terms of what plants care about? What's the bell for a plant? What's the food for a plant? The food for a plant, for example, is light. And salivation is a phototropic response. So we might say, we might ask, we are doing that as of today. We are trying to find out if a plant is able to connect the dots in the very same way that animals connect their dots, right? So if a plant integrates information, if a plant can be anesthetized, if a plant is able to learn how to connect the dots, what prevents us from concluding that they have their own subjective sense of awareness? Unless we say, no, they cannot because they have to resemble me. Homo sapiens, oh, we are so pretty, so smart. Oh, if we get rid of ourselves, we might think different, right? Just, how much time I have left? 20 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay, good. So just bear with me for a sec. Because we are running another, so that's one experiment we are running at the moment in our lab. We are doing something else. And I think this is, it gets at some of the things you were discussing before. Think of you are crossing the pond, okay? JFK, you fly to New York. And we all know what happens. You get there, hammered, jet-lagged, right? And if you are with your pet, if you carry your pet, your cat or your pet, I bet any of you who loves his pet would get there to New York and think, oh, my pet, poor you, are you okay? Because you've got to be as jet-lagged as I am. It was this time when we left from Marco Polo Airport, and all of a sudden you get to JFK, and oh, shit, I thought it was, my body tells me it's dinner time, and these guys are having breakfast or whatever, right? So it's a different time zone, and I need some time to get used to the new local cues. So I get jet-lagged. And what do we do, by the way, when we are jet-lagged? You can confess. We take melatonin, right? Synthetic melatonin, right? Okay, think of plants. When I say plants take a nap, people say, okay, here's Paco the philosopher speaking metaphorically. No, not metaphorically. Think of legumes, okay? Like the climbing bean that I time-lapse. These plants, I like them because I can study their approaching maneuver to the pole, but also how their leaves fold at night. So legumes fold their leaves at night. Actually, they anticipate sunset. Before the sun sets, they start folding them. And before the sun rises in the morning, they start unfolding them. So this nyctinastic pattern, this movement is called nyctinastic. This folding and unfolding, anticipatorily, okay, allows me to play them a trick. I can shift in the lab, I can shift the photo period. So I have a photo period with artificial lighting, right, in the lab, not in the open, in the lab. So I can say 16 hours of daylight 8 hours of sleep. And they are entrained to this rhythm, right? So I can shift the photo period and make them cross the pond. And when they are expecting the sun to set, it doesn't set. So that I can study the disruption of their clocks. Now, we know what happens in our case, right? We have circadian clocks. And that's an evolutionary adaptation, right? So we all evolved circadian clocks to keep time simply because it pays off, evolutionarily speaking. It pays off to keep track of the day-night cycle. So the day-night cycle is informative to us. It allows us to say, hey, time to take a break, time to go out and hunt, time to hide, time to whatever. But life needs a break. So sleep, non-metaphorically, is DNA repair. It's the time of life needs to repair their DNA, for example, among many other things. But all life needs to take a break, right? So, okay, so climbing beans, legumes in general, they, fasten your seatbelt, they biosynthesize their own melatonin, okay? So they biosynthesize their own melatonin. Now we need to ask, if we are not that arrogant, we should ask, hey, why do they do that? Because they don't do it for myself. I know I can use that molecule and go to the pharma and make a patent, but the question is not the profit. The question is, why would they do that for themselves? Why would plants biosynthesize melatonin? By the way, when you harm them, they also biosynthesize anesthetic molecules, by the way. Okay, back to melatonin. So you see the peak. So in the same way that melatonin has a peak in the evening for humans, and then it wears off during the day, so it has this 24 hours distribution, in plants, it also has its own distribution. So melatonin in plants peaks and drops throughout the 24 hours, right? So we can now see why this is not metaphorical. Hey, they need to take a break, they do their things, and they biosynthesize their own melatonin. We do take synthetic melatonin pills, and we understand the reason, and we don't grant them a reason to do so for themselves. Now we can, this is what we are doing at the moment, we can add exogenous melatonin. So we can incorporate melatonin spray, we can spray melatonin onto them to see if that eases them, allows them to come out of jet lag, right? As it happens in our own case. So they can cross their own pond and they can go back to normal in their own way. We just need to think that we are not providing any gold standard for them whatsoever, right? So, intelligence. We wanted some definition, okay? I'm gonna offer one. Intelligence has to do with behavior, which is what I can see, behavior being adaptive, but not just being adaptive, being flexible, not being hardwired. I need to be able to change gear as the need arises, to learn from my mistakes. So I can change patterns of behavior in flexible ways. And more importantly, behave anticipatorily, ahead of time, foresee future contingencies. Oh, things might go wrong, especially because if you're a plant and you grow slowly, it takes time for you to reach your goals, right? So it takes time for me to reach my goal. So I better make sure I'm growing in the right direction. Otherwise, by the time I get to catch the train, I realized it was leaving from a different station. So I better make sure I know where I'm going. So plant behavior, which is adaptive, flexible, anticipatory, and goal-directed, is all they need to be granted intelligence. Now, what do we need to be doing? We need to rethink root and branch, the educational system. Because in 100 years' time, a new generation, new brains, whose brains will have been picked differently, will be laughing at things that we take for granted nowadays, right? So this is, to me, I think, the most important message. Education, education, and education. Let's rethink it, all of us together. Thank you.
Oh, this was really fantastic.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, if you were to be born again as a plant, what would you be?
Oh my God.
Okay, let's actually take a moment to think about each and every one of you. Can you please think which kind of plant, che pianta sareste se dovreste rincarnarvi? Which plant would you be if you were born again? And actually, why don't we do a little exercise in a game? Each of you get up and do your plant. Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we share. And then you share with your neighbor. Please do it now. Can we have some lights on the...
Whoa. What are you?
I am an oak.
Oh, nice.
Why don't you get up and do it?
This has become
Please,
a workshop.
get up. We need to get up just to start. Okay, thanks for doing it. Come on.
Okay, so just stay there.
I stay there. Wow, yes, we know. Thank you. And share with your neighbor, tell them which plant you like. Dite al vostro vicino che pianta siete, se non la volete fare, per favore.
I can't help it but think that I'm twining around you like a climbing plant.
Okay, so you are. Thank you so much. This was so inspiring.
Thank
Look
you.
at this, look.
Yeah.
And actually, it's great to think that we are in Venice. We are on top of a forest, which is underwater. This is probably the unique forest, the only forest underwater. So look, as much above, we are below, and this is it's fantastic. This is the intelligent.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Paco. And thanks for being here. Thanks, everybody, for playing the game. We all are also plants. Planta Sapiens, a book to read. I mean, definitely I'm going to get this book. So now...
Paco, you should stay for the workshop Sumus Terra about how to regenerate the soil, the fruits, the vegetables, because we are going to have a concert with these two plants, because we are going to put electrodes, and we have Sarah and Damien, I don't know where they are, and they are going to play music with the plants, because the plants are intelligent, and we can record the electromagnetic sound coming from the plants, and we can put them in a glass of water, and if we use this glass of water, we can give the intelligence of the plants to the soil, and then we can have a sort of, let's say, natural pesticide or insecticide, but without any chemical ingredients, just with the intelligence of the plants. And this is what we are going to discover tonight at the workshop.